Hi, my name is Hannah Hayden, and my presentation is Police Approaches and Difficulties Dealing with Those Who Have a Mental Illness. This covers Chapter 13 of our book. Introduction. In this presentation, I will be going over the involvement rates of mentally ill people, so a couple of facts I have found throughout my research. I will then go over the CIT, which is the Crisis Intervention Training and Teams. After that, I will talk about the dangers police officers have when dealing with a person who is mentally ill. Next, I'll talk about the main approaches police officers are taking to deal with those who suffer with a mental illness. Then, I will go over the victim and police point of view by giving a true story about a man being shot and killed by a police officer, and the victim did have a mental illness. And lastly, I will have my conclusion, and all of my sources will be in the last two slides of this presentation. Involvement of mentally ill. The number of people who struggle with mental illness keeps going up. It estimated that 20 to 40% of police calls for serious involvement of a mentally ill person. An estimated 7% of police contacts in jurisdiction with 100,000 or more people involve the mentally ill. A survey that was provided for a community found out that about 9 in 10, so 92% of patrol officers have at least one encounter with a mentally ill person in a crisis each month. Some officers average about 6 encounters. Most police encounters are with homeless people who have a severe mental illness. According to a 2015 assessment by the U.S. Department, 564,708 people were homeless on a given night in the United States. At a minimum, 140,000 or 25% of those people were seriously mentally ill, and 250,000 or 45% had any mental disability. CIT. The CIT stands for Crisis Intervention Training/Teams. This is where officers learn to approach mentally ill suspects differently. The CIT focuses on using body language and voice commands to control the situations better and to ease the emotions of the suspect. The CIT also goes over how to know the difference between someone who needs to be taken to a mental hospital and someone who needs to go to jail. Some of the strategies CIT is working on to help provide a foundation for a problem reduction is 1. Work with the mental health community by providing professionals in the mental illness field and bring them to the police force to provide training and work with people who are struggling with mental illness. 2. Work with emergency hospitals by bringing people who have a severe mental illness into the hospitals to get the help they need. 3. Train police officers, meaning police officers must know how to handle incidents that involve a person with a mental illness. Proper training, which includes lectures, discussions, tours of mental health facilities, and role-playing. The CIT has already seen an improvement within police officers' confidence and attitudes when they have to deal with someone who has a mental disability. 4. Use less lethal weapons, meaning a calm demeanor will create a safer environment for the police officers and the suspects. Those who struggle with a mental illness tend to freak out and become more hostile when they feel threatened. So by creating a more calming tactic will better the situation all around. Lastly, target repeat criminals, locations, and hotspots. It is known that a certain location can be the hotspot of crimes. In Billings, Montana, North Park is a place where you can expect crimes to happen. So if we look at all those places and the criminals who are always in trouble, you will see a difference in the amount of crimes being committed. The graph I have provided is showing what states require officers to be trained in responding to those who have a mental illness, in the states who have passed legislation creating a requirement for establishing crisis intervention teams. Dangers police officers must deal with. Every mental illness is different. Every person is different. Every suspect that has a mental illness will be different. Being a police officer, you are constantly risking your life. When dealing with someone who is not all mentally there, you are now put into a more dangerous situation. You never know how someone is going to react to you and the entire situation. Mental illness could be a factor in up to half of all police shootings, according to a study done in Washington. Last year alone, police shot and killed 1,017 people. 25% of those killings were people with a mental illness, according to the Washington's database. The two most dangerous things police officers have to deal with when approaching a situation with a mentally ill person is how that person would react. They could either handle the situation with respect and staying calm, or the person could feel threatened and act hostile, dangerous, or aggressive, making the situation worse. The second thing being the backlash police officers get. People are not currently happy with how police officers are dealing with mentally ill suspects, making it hard for police officers to deal with these situations. The chart I have added into this slide is just giving you a visual of how many people have a mental health problem or substance abuse problem. Approaches. The approaches that police officers are taking to better deal with the situations involving a mental ill person include better training, more awareness, more calmness, dealing with different types of mental illness, and gaining more confidence. Police officers take a 40-hour CIT program that aims to teach police officers how to de-escalate a situation, gain confidence in understanding the level of mental illness a person has. They have police officers relate better to these people by having them take a daily candy that represents pills so they understand how hard it is to take medicine every day. And this helps police officers relate to the suspects. They become understanding with screening centers and how scary it is for people to deal with being mentally ill. The CIT helps police officers get the training they need to help these people by giving them chances to relate to them. Police officers are being taught to create a calming environment that will not scare or make a person feel threatened, and this will hopefully create less violent attacks on both sides. And police officers are now getting trained to deal with those who have schizophrenia, which is when the suspect would be hearing voices and seeing other people. In the end, police officers are learning more about mental illness and what the best way to deal with it is. Victim and police officer point of view. People with untreated mental illnesses are 16 times more likely to be killed by police. Being a person with a mental illness, you already feel threatened because police officers just don't understand you and don't know how to help you. If you are a young black man with a mental illness, you are the most vulnerable group of all. I could give you a list of what victims feel and how they are afraid, but I didn't get the true victim point of view until I read a story about a man with a mental illness that was shot and killed. When researching a police officer's point of view, they are always on alarm because you truly don't know what type of situation you are walking into. I am going to tell you the story about Ricardo because I think it truly shows the victim's family's point of view and a police officer's point of view. It also shows how this topic isn't talked about enough and how nobody truly knows how to deal with these situations. Ricardo Munoz was 27 years old and is a man that was shot several times by a police officer. Ricardo was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia 5 years prior to his death. He lived with his mother in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The day of Ricardo's death is one nobody in his family will forget. Ricardo's mother and sister were talking about how Ricardo was having an episode this morning, and that he was very aggressive and punching the hood of a car. They couldn't calm him down, and they knew he needed professional help. In order for Ricardo to be able to get the professional help he needed, he had to call the police to get a petition from a judge saying he needed hospital psychiatric treatment, an involuntary commitment. Ricardo's sister called the police in order to get the petition and mentioned that Ricardo was trying to break into his mother's house, but she didn't mention that he lived there. And she said the mother was afraid to go back home with him. She didn't mean for the police officers to think he was breaking into the house, but to show that he was unstable. Both the sister and mother made it clear that they were never threatened by Ricardo. They just didn't know how to help him. And the sister didn't mean Ricardo was a threat, but that he just needed to get help. Once a police officer showed up outside the house, Ricardo ran up the stairs and got a hunting knife. Ricardo went outside and shouted, "Get the bad word back." Ricardo then starts to run at the police officer, causing the police officer to run. Then the police officer turned around and shot him. This case to me truly shows that nobody knows how to deal with these situations. Ricardo's mother and sister were trying to get him the help he needed and didn't know he would react the way he did towards that cop. And the cop wasn't prepared to have this man running at him with a knife. This story shows that nobody is prepared and that we need to talk more about mental illness and learn how to deal with it without it becoming violent. Conclusion. We have already seen major improvement by police officers learning how to deal with those who are mentally unstable. We are seeing police officers do their job, but we now need to see those who struggle with mental illness do their part by taking care of themselves and getting the help they need. Police officers are being trained longer and harder when dealing with someone who is mentally unstable. Because they are unpredictable, they are learning to be more understanding and more calm when approaching. Police officers are also learning about all the different types of mental illness and how each one needs a different approach. The story with Ricardo is a prime example of never knowing what could happen in a situation. What may seem like family members trying to help out other family members turned into a killing. Those with a severe mentally disabled show no consistency in their actions, therefore training the police officers becomes harder. The CIT program is doing what it can to better prepare police officers, but it can never fully prepare them enough. At the end of the day, police officers can say they are learning different ways to approach someone with a mental disability and are becoming better trained. My discussion question is, how would you better prepare an officer to handle a person with a severe mental illness? My feedback question is, do you think that by adding the story of Ricardo, it created a different perspective, but it also still flowed with my presentation?